Gleeson is here with us tonight, and by the way, his family is here. Just give us a wave. Yep, kids up the back there, which is awesome. And if you don't know Tony, Tony's one of the great guys in our church. He's got an incredible story to tell. So we're going to do an interview tonight. So if you're watching online, big welcome to you. We're going to hear some of your story. I don't know if we'll get through all of it.
No, it's quite complex.
Yeah. When Tony sent me an email of like a bit of his life history, the email said, "Get your tea and bickies ready." And it was like reading a novel. It was just so good. And so as a church, we always want to celebrate what God does in people's lives and what he has done. And so part of what we do on Saturday night is we just make space to hear people's stories, to hear testimonies. And so tonight is going to be an amazing story, an amazing testimony of God's faithfulness. So. And it's going to be pretty raw. You're okay with raw? Real people, real God. So welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us.
Excellent to be here.
Tell us a bit about you, your family, and kind of what do you do?
Yeah, so I've been married to 31 years for the lovely Cheryl, and out of our marriage we've had 4 children, Jess, Katie, Lauren and Nathan, and we actually have 2 grandchildren as well, Harley and Isla, so a wonderful family unit. And at the moment I'm working at Hunter Sports High as a rugby league coordinator and an academic mentor is the title they've given me. Where I just look after the guys outside of the football training. I look after them in class, etc. And I also coach at the reserve grade nights after that. So it's pretty full on.
Do.
Any Knights questions, mate? No.
Look, I guarantee the conversation will go to NRL at some point in this conversation. But as you can imagine, as a diehard Knights fan, I was frothing when someone as part of the Knights coaching staff came in, because for the last 8 years I have been bagged out from being a Knights supporter. So to finally have someone alongside me as a brother. The first time I came to the Thrive Church, Brad was talking about the Knights, and I thought, oh wow, this must be a sign, you know, that he's. But I realise he talks about it every week, so it was just Yes. I orientate my social life around when the Newcastle Knights are playing. But we will get into that because it's a pretty cool space to be in and to be a believer in that elite level sports coaching. But let's go back a little bit into your life and your story. And I only know a little bit of a glimpse of it, but I know you were in the police force for many years. So you did that. Tell us a bit about that journey and how you got into that and maybe how you came out of that. Yeah,
so I joined when I was 18 out of school, a Newcastle boy, just straight out, moved down to Sydney on my Pat Malone and joined the police force. And that was a very interesting time. I worked the first 8 years of my service at King's Cross and Central and saw some things that a young Newcastle boy I'd only been to Sydney 6 times in my entire life. So King's Cross was a bit of an eye-opener, I can tell you. And so that was a very interesting journey, some really good times, but it was also a time that it was probably in a really bad state culturally, the police at that time, and me being a young, impressionable man, when I got down there was a very heavy drinking culture, which is something that I embraced with both hands and went through and caused a lot of issues for me later on down the track. But I ended up having different levels throughout the police and ended up as a sergeant in Newcastle before I actually got medically retired through a bit of through a few stress issues. So
clearly like a leadership thing on your life, Tony. Like there's a bit of a theme coming through there.
It's not something I asked for either. I didn't want to be a team leader, but I saw all the guys who were getting team leader jobs, and I thought, wow, those blokes are absolute lunatics. So I thought, I've got to have a crack at it. So that's how I became a sergeant, and then same with my coaching. I sort of got pushed into it, and went from there.
It's amazing. My brother is in the police force, and I hear stories what it's like for him. And so anyone who's in the police force, it's a tough gig. So tell us, when you first came to faith in Christ, tell us a bit about that experience. You're a born-again believer, relationship with God. So, tell us a bit about that journey of finding God and kind of how you came to know Christ.
Yeah, so I was brought up in a really traditional Irish Catholic type family. My dad was one of 6. We had 8 kids in our family. Dad was one of 6, so 5 sisters and himself. Poor bugger. But Three of his sisters ended up Catholic nuns for a period, and Dad was actually studying to be a Morris brother when he met Mum, and so that was the type of background we grew up in as far as our faith. So I always believed in Jesus. I had a faith from a very young age where I'd always pray and talk to Jesus on a very personal level, and that sort of changed and waned as I went through my life, but. Yeah, so that was through that time. Had a few difficulties outside of our family. Were really religious. Looked like the ideal family. Unfortunately, on the inside, Mum and Dad had a very rocky relationship and a lot of conflict in the home. They sort of. I think the only thing they had in common was their wedding date. By the time they finished their... They never separated, they stayed together, but unfortunately that caused a lot of conflict. So where I'm getting to there is around my mid-teens, I guess, I decided that I wasn't going to be the type of Christian that I thought that example was maybe setting, So I'd been going to Mass all the time, but I went away from the church and... Had different periods. When I got married, my wife was very supportive. I had some anxiety issues, which we can talk about a little bit later. But ended up going back to the church for a long time, being very committed, and then probably around 35, I fell away in my faith again. And yeah, it's only been recently that I've, in the last 5 years or so, that I've really committed to Christ again. So.
It's amazing. So when you sent me your notes, there were some big rock issues or big things that kind of where you had one of them, like you just had this radical encounter with God. Share one of those or a couple of those things that really, the way God drew you back, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Can you share one or two of those
yeah,
things?
I will. I'll tell you a few and just tell me to stop talking when you've had enough. But I'd had a particular battle with alcohol my whole life, starting when I was 15 and going right through to the present day, really. But I, at this point, I'd got to breaking point where it was either, basically got to a very, very depressed and very, very dark place, and sort of had my end point where I thought I've got to just change this and come out of this and find a way to get back to Christ, because I had been trying. I thought I'd been trying. I never stopped going to Mass, so I still went to Mass every Sunday. But then that would be often followed up by a drinking session, and so yeah, part of that was I'd got to the point where I thought this has got to stop, and I had three sort of encounters, I guess you'd call. All of them were whilst I was hungover, feeling fairly unwell the next day after a big night, and I started walking on the track between Shelley Beach and Crackneck and Forries Tower. Anyway, so whilst I was doing that, my sister, who's in the Hope UC Church up in Newcastle, she'd been sending me all these messages from different speakers, and one in particular I started listening to was Erwin McManus from Mosaic, and so I just became obsessed with his talk. So to preface this, every one of these encounters, A, I was hungover, B, I was listening to a message, and C, I was praying for help to get me out of my bind. Anyway, the first one, I was walking up really cranky with myself, and the message that I'd listened to was about how God wants us to be our best version of ourselves, and he wants us to really achieve and be as good as we can be and do magnificent things whilst on earth, and we've all got a purpose. And so I think I said it out loud, I don't know, but it was definitely a yell in my head, what is it you want from me, God? That was sort of the end of the prayer. And I walked up about probably 400 metres later, and it was on the track before they'd done it all up. It was really, really bare and barren. And when I was walking up, there was a rock on the side of the track, and I'd just done a garden at home with all these garden rocks, and it was a garden rock. So I thought I'll pick that up and just throw it in my pocket and take it home, and felt that there was painting on the other side. So as I turned it over, I saw there was an inscription on the other side with a Star of David and a number of stars. Sorry, take a deep breath. And underneath it had reach for the stars, and that was written on the rock. And so I just thought, oh yeah, fair, yeah, as if. And I started to think about it on the way down, and I thought, imagine if God did want that type of relationship with us, where he did want to let us know that he was there for us and he wanted us to live our best life. And anyway, so I'll take a deep breath because I normally tear up and lose it at this point, but I just felt this overwhelming peace and inside. And anyway, so I went home and I told the kids and the wife about it, and they thought I'd gone mad, of course. But they framed it up for me, and they put a wonderful quote from Albert Einstein underneath in the frame that says, there's only two ways for you to look at your life. Look at your life as if nothing is a miracle, or look at your life as if everything is a miracle. And so that's just a bit of a byline. But I know I'm going on here, but there's two other sort of stories, very similar. There was another message I heard about evangelising. There was the pastor had evangelised a woman in a concert line, and she gave her life to Jesus that day. And I was praying and said, Jesus, I can't evangelise. I'm too weak. I'm not courageous enough to do that. And literally within 20... But I said, can you please give me the strength to be able to talk to other people about Jesus? Within 20 metres of me saying that prayer, I walked across the car park at the top of Crackneck, and this young bloke approached me and said, can I ask you some questions about an assessment task I'm doing? And I sort of looked around, mate, is this fair dinkum? And he said, what are some things, values and beliefs that you had as a young man that through your family, that you got taught by your family, that you've brought into your life or changed as an adult? And I just thought, well, there's never a better time, and I started talking about my recent encounters with Jesus and the fact I'd changed the way that I thought about God, that it's not just a God who sits up and waits for us in heaven. He's the one who wants to have a relationship with us, you know. And so I started telling him about that and my recent, the way I'd been talking to my kids about that as well. But a kicker to that was, one of my big fears at the time was being found out as a Christian by the Knights community, because there was some pretty anti-Christian guys in the community at the time. And just by coincidence, the guy that asked me the question was a Knights junior player who I'd coached, but he didn't recognise me. I had a hat and sunnies on. And so not only did God give me the opportunity, he also, you want courage? Well, here's a crack, you know. And so he said, can I just get your name? I said, Mac, it's me, it's Gleeson. And he, Gleeson, how are you? And we started talking about football, and off I went. And the third one was, so I think God, in those two incidents, he'd given me the cuddle and the hug and let me know he loved me, and in the next one he'd sort of said, okay, off you go and encourage me to go and talk about Jesus. But I was still, even after those couple of interactions, drinking, and this was the third occasion. It was more like a smack in the face the third time. Was praying and saying, I just need to find a way out, I just can't do it. And this guy walked straight up to me on the track. He had a John on his shirt, was inscribed John 1 chapter 14. Came straight to me and just started evangelising and talking about what my belief was about Jesus. And the story that he ended up telling me was that the story of the Laudations, which they mention in Revelations about the lukewarm. You can't be lukewarm. And he told me that story, how the Laudations drew water from the mountains that was cold, but when it got down to them, it was lukewarm. And when they drew from the hot springs upwards, it was lukewarm and it was useless to anyone. And his message, he said to me, was either be there or don't be there. So that was a real sort of knock in the head. And from that point, I really sat up and went, wow, if this is God, he's telling me something pretty direct, and I'm asking for it. And I think at that point, and three things I got out of that was, A, God does want to be part of our lives, and he wants to be a personal part of our lives. And secondly, that he does want us to talk about the message and tell others about it. It's not just for me to sit at home and tell the wonderful story to my kids, and that's where it ends. And the third part was, if you're going to do it, you need to be all in. And it was interesting, that guy, when he had the shirt, and everyone that walked past, because I'm sitting there, mate, is this guy an angel or something? Or, but his shirt was too dirty, so I thought, no, he can't be an angel. And But every time someone walked past, he'd cover his shirt up and stop talking, where he'd been so bold to come up to me. But then so it was just wonderful encounters. And I think just as a follow-up to that, it's not that I'm up there walking every day now looking for miracles. I walk every day. And I think that's an important thing too, is that we shouldn't always be looking for signs, because it's now, after those encounters, it was up to me to take the action and get in the Word and learn more and grow my wisdom, and that was sort of where I went from there. So
how good's that? So good. Crackneck. Oh, I love that spot. You know what I love about that? I'm feeling a bit emotional hearing it, because God shows up even when you're not living a perfect life. Like, he's not looking for perfection. He's not looking for you to have it all your ducks in a row. He's just saying, I'm going after the one who's looking for me. Right. So anyone sitting here tonight, you don't have to have your life perfect for God to talk to you. And the other thing I got from that is he knows exactly what each person needs to build their faith. That's incredible. Can we go maybe a little bit vulnerable now? And you already have been. Because as a church, we've been talking a fair bit about anxiety, depression, that whole journey with mental health. Yeah. And I know a lot of us have been on that journey like you. Could you just share a bit about that journey?
Sure.
And perhaps how faith in Christ has helped you with that?
Yeah, so I was, it's been a huge part of my life since I was early 20s, mainly through my own actions. Through drinking was a big precursor to that, drinking so much, and I was also played rugby league, and I was very fit, and so that combination of training very hard and drinking very hard had a bit of a effect on my heart rhythm. So that was where it sort of all started. I started getting heart arrhythmias, which started to cause me a bit of anxiety, and then from there it actually grew into I had an operation. I didn't want to tell Brad this when he was going to get his nose operated on. But when I was 20, I had a shoulder.
Now he tells me.
I had a shoulder operation where they didn't knock me out properly, and so I was unconscious, and they thought I was out, but I could hear everything that they were saying, and I still had my gag reflex, and I actually choked on the tongue depressant, and they turned me on my side, and they were trying to rip that out of my mouth while I was still aware what was happening. And from that and another couple of incidents that I had through the police, I developed chronic post-traumatic stress, which I didn't know, and I didn't tell anyone. My wife didn't even know for around 10 years, but I was in a chronic state of panic more times than not, and just trying to scrape through. And so the drink and the only thing that would take my anxiety away was actually drinking, and then that would then create a vicious cycle, So I went through that for many years, even when I had a period of not drinking from, say, around 25 to mid-30s when the kids were growing up, and I was right into my footy playing, but my panic attacks and my anxiety was probably at its worst at that point. And anyway, so then 35, I started, unfortunately, we got to another station, drinking again. It's a common theme, and went through and just had these enormous panic attacks and anxiety for so many years. And yeah, to be honest, they continued until probably 5 years ago. I had virtually miraculous healing, and that's not to say that before that I'd been reading a lot and researched, and a lot of, and for anyone who does suffer, one of the big things that helped me was finding out about what actually physically is happening to you when you have an anxiety attack. And the fact that noradrenaline's produced in your brain, and cortisol affects your thoughts and how you can think, and your clarity in your thoughts, and then your heart speeds up, etc. So part of that really helped me was learning that. But having said that, I still had the panic attacks, and it's really been, I would say, miraculous in the last 5 years that for me to be sitting here talking to you guys about my experience. If I'd been told 5 years ago and shown this video, I would be absolutely in a ball in the corner, just freaking out. Like it's been miraculous, and I think it's more the fact that I always knew that I should be being a Christian, because I knew God, and I never doubted God, and I never doubted there was a Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and I was just not living the life that I was meant to live. and my anxieties grew out of that, and the more that I denied where I should have been and where God wanted me, I knew that was where I needed to be, and I wasn't, and I didn't have the courage. And so
obedience, would you say?
Definitely,
being obedient to God brought you through. Wow.
Well, just trying to do it my own way was, I'd made a definite decision. This was my wonderful logic as a young man, that I was just going to party and go hard until I was in my mid-60s and then turn my life to God, and then I could get the best of both worlds. That was sort of where my decision at about 18 or 17. And that didn't work out very well for me.
Oh, so that doesn't work?
No.
Oh,
don't try it at home, I can tell you.
That's amazing. Thanks for being so honest. That's not an easy thing for a bloke to be so honest like that. Leader of men, especially I've come out of footy culture. I understand it, playing a bit of footy growing up. It's very hard to talk honestly about that stuff. So thanks for being so honest. And I know that would have been encouraging for someone, maybe even online today, that you can be going through anxiety and it not be a shameful thing. You don't have to be ashamed for how you feel. Let's talk about footy, if that's all right. Let's move into that, of course.
Let's do it.
So the 2001 Newcastle Knights team.
I remember it well.
In your opinion, is it the greatest team the Knights ever produced?
Yeah, I think I'd have to say so. I think 97 was more of a, it was a half comp, as they say, but I think 2001 with
That's not a serious question. I was going to wear that jersey.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, let's talk about, because you are in elite level coaching, so it's pretty amazing. So you do coach men who are going on a professional sporting pathway, and one of your daughters, I forget which one of the girls I was talking to, was saying, you ought to see Dad in the change rooms. He's just like a different person. And so, but it does require a certain skill set, like it's to be a coach of men. Tell us why you love it and how you kind of got into this field. Like, you're in elite level coaching now. How did you even land there?
Yeah, I guess during all that stuff, I'd got pushed into coaching. I'd finished playing, and a mate of mine who's a really good mentor and a great fella. He was about my age actually when I was mid-30s, and I'd done some footy training with him, and as I was the trainer of his team, as in the fitness trainer, and he pushed me into coaching back in, I think that was 04 or 03, I think it was. And so that was where I started. I never actually wanted to be a head coach. I was actually at Mass. This guy used to go to Mass with me, and he came outside and shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, Gleeson." I said, "Oh, what for?" He said, "You got the 19s at the entrance." And so I didn't even apply for that. And he said, "Well, I got it for you." Anyway, so I got pushed into it. But from that point, I became really interested in the tactical side of the game and how you could actually work with teams, and as I say, I probably just became obsessed, which is a common theme in my makeup. And when I start something, it's very hard for me to put it down. So I end up getting into studies. I did a full-time university degree in sports coaching and administration, and after coaching a local side here on the Central Coast and having a bit of success, I got offered a job at the Knights junior level, and got pretty lucky. We had a really good team. I think 8 of those guys that I coached the first year have played NRL and are still playing NRL. So we won the national title, and which was a pretty big thing back then. And then I just progressed through the ranks, and also my job at the school as well was interactive with that. So it was so I progressed through and ended up getting a gig from the 20s, went to the Roosters for a year, and then came back
to the dark side. If I'd have known you went to the dark side, I would never have had you up here. Anyway, keep going.
Came back to the Knights, and then ended up in reserve grade. So
if you're a Roosters fan, out you go. That's incredible, though. Just what you said. I want to I'd love you to expand, and we've got a little bit starting to come towards the end, but bringing young guys through, like leader of men, like it's so much more than just the sport, isn't it? The great coaches seem to be able to create great people, not just great sport. But something you said to me that stuck with me, it was like a leadership piece of God, and I'd love you to expand on it. But I said to Tony one day, I went, so of all the young junior players that you coach, all the talented guys coming through that have got outstanding talent, what's one of the common factors that causes them, maybe if they don't go on and be professional or make a career of it, what's the reason? And you said to me, most of the time it isn't talent, It's they stop being willing to be coached. And immediately when you said that, I thought, what a life principle. And could you expand a bit on that from a leadership point of view? Yeah, you probably say it better than I will, but yeah, expand on that thought about what happens. What's that thing that separates the talented guys and why they maybe not go on?
Yeah, I guess a lot of guys, and so much of it too, I think, comes from the junior systems where guys get a lot of praise about what they're doing, and they actually, and it's something that I had a bit of when I was a kid, they actually tie their self-esteem up in their rugby league. So basically they think that all they are is a rugby league player and they're really good at it. And so it's almost a case where if you talk to a guy about his game, if they're in that situation where they've had a lot of false self-esteem, I guess, if you try and talk to them, they're very closed-minded because it's almost like you're insulting their character when you actually start to coach them and say, mate, you need to fix up this area or whatever. So those are the guys who I see a fair bit of that are very talented, but through that, I think it's basically through the fact that they've tied up all that in their self-esteem. They refuse to listen to any instruction, so they actually stay at the level they're at instead of continually improving. And the guys that I see improve, and it's probably similar to the story I told about myself, are the ones that have been through a lot of hard knocks. They've been injured, they've been knocked back from sides, and so they develop a really strong level of resilience and come through, and they keep trying, and they know where they're going, and they keep working for it. And they're the guys that you see sometimes you think, wow, at 13, 14, they've got no chance. And
Kirk Gidley would be a good
spot on. He didn't get picked in a rep side till he was 19. And so just all those knockbacks just give them that resilience and the desire, I guess, to keep working hard and progressing and achieving their goals. So it's
I love that. That's a nugget. Identity's in there, and to continue being teachable. Great leadership principles that I really took on board. Let me just finish with this question, Tony, unless you want to say anything else. But
that's all right.
Like being a Christian in that environment. So one of our good friends was the chaplain at the Newcastle Knights.
Yep.
He's a pastor in England now. He was there for 2 years under Brian Smith those years.
Wow.
And he talked about being a Christian leader in that environment. He said it wasn't easy.
No.
In a rugby league, almost hard man's environment. What's it like to be, or two questions, what's it like to be a believer, a Christian in that kind of environment? And secondly, for those of us that are in maybe spheres that might be a little bit hostile to gospel or faith, how do you shine Jesus in those kind of environments?
Yeah, I think it's hard in a lot of ways, but it's something that you need to do if you're going to be serious about it. For me, I think it's a matter, firstly, like I will tell the teams that I'm involved with. We normally have an introduction type of thing at the start of the year that I'm a Christian and I read the Bible every day and I pray, and just leave it at that. I don't go out, and I heard you talk the other week about you can't just grab someone and it's not very successful. Okay, you need Jesus in your life, and I can guarantee if you did that at footy training, you probably wouldn't be there long.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it would be. And they're normally bigger.
110 kilogram front rower.
Yeah, and so just letting them know that opens up that channel, I guess, if someone's curious. And I think so many people they want to find out what the meaning is in their life, and so few people have heard about Jesus, or so many haven't heard about Jesus, I guess. I think one of the cultural things that's changed in rugby league, which has been good, is the Islander guys. They're really open about their faith, and Lucas, where is he? And
what do you think that is, by the way? Is that a little bit of their family history culture, like missionaries went to the South Pacific Islands, you think, and those strong family Christian values in the generations?
I guess it is, and they're also very strong as a unit. Like, they're not, we might have 20 Caucasian guys there, and there'll be groups of 2 and 3 of them around, but the Islander guys are always all together, and so they feel that strength in community as well, which is a big thing, and I think that's a good takeaway for it as well, is strength in community, and so but honestly, the young guys nowadays, they're so used to seeing different races and different religions and people with disability. They cope with it a lot better than I think we did when we were growing up. and so that environment is not as hard as it probably used to be. But having said that, you still don't get there's still not a lot of Christians outside of the Islander boys. So just letting them know, being really open and showing them you care about them as well. And that's just a common leadership principle anyway. Just making sure you take an interest in them as a person, and if any of their family members are ill, you ask about them, and just a general interest in what they're doing outside of rugby league. And then if the question does come up, then I think, it gives you the opportunity to just talk to them about your experience. Yeah.
How good was that? Such a good conversation.